All right, so here's kind of the format. You guys should have got a booklet when you came in the door. If you didn't get one, go ahead and get one now. They're back in the back. Mary's got them. The nature of this policy is such that it's basically going to be read to you for a little bit of time of questions and answers. I want to make sure that we hit every item in here. And so we will have a time for questions and answers, but we also have 35 minutes. I read this policy to empty chairs on Friday, and it took me 30 minutes. And so with that in mind, I'm going to read fast because that's something I'm really good at. And it'll make the day a whole lot funner. Please do not think I'll be offended if you want to get some coffee or get a drink or anything like that in the middle of it. But if you guys are sitting out in the back talking, I'll be like, what in the world? But, don't be afraid to get up and do what you need to do. The girls' bathroom door is fixed, thanks to Mark Stover. So now you can use the restroom if you're a girl, because it was broken earlier and you couldn't get in. This is a process we've been working on now for about 6 months. 8 months or longer. And this is something that most churches our size have in place. And now we have it. We're very proud of this policy. We've toiled over this with multiple churches. We have every word in this policy has been thought through. This is not just kind of thrown together. And Matt and I were talking Friday about how important this is and how proud we are of a policy. I never stood in front of a group and said, I'm proud of this policy. This is one I can actually say I'm very proud of. I think the rules in it are going to protect you guys, and it will protect the whole church, and most importantly, kids. And so, if you will, go ahead and turn to page 3 in your book, and we'll get started. This is the top attached. You'll find the Canopy Roads Baptist Church Child Youth Protection Policy, Requirements and Guidelines. You also find forms to use that are attached to the appendices. You don't have the forms in your booklet, but they are available online, and you will get those as well. You also got some of the forms in your big signing thing. Remember that this policy being attached strengthens the ministry of our church as we strive to ensure the safety and protection of children and youth at our church. Go ahead and turn to page 5. As you go through this, if you do have questions, underline your questions. Write your questions out. So that way after the presentation, in case we run out of time, we can work through some of those questions within the 30-minute span we have. Page 5, it says, the congregation of Canopy Roads Baptist Church is committed to providing a safe and secure environment for all children, youth, and volunteers to participate in the ministries and activities sponsored by the church. The commitment to preserving the church as a holy place of safety and protection for all who would enter, and as a place in which the people can experience the love of God through appropriate relations with each other, with others. Of course, definitions. Definitions are incredibly important because some of you guys in here are going to meet different definitions. Some of you guys are lucky enough to meet multiple definitions. And so identify which one you are as we go through it. 1.1, child and youth and adult. The following the public school system, a child is anyone in 5th grade or below, usually under the age of 11. A youth is anyone not a child and under the age of 18, usually 11 to 17. An adult is anyone 18 years or older. And in this room, we have people who meet all those criteria except for children, probably. A paid staff person is someone who paid by the church, overseen by the senior pastor, and screened. An adult volunteer is someone who has not been screened. They will go through the application and interview process. They can work in a room with a screened adult or a paid staff person. A screened adult is a volunteer who has gone through the screening process. A youth volunteer is someone grades 6 through 12 and not 18 years old. They will have been screened, and yet they will go through the application and interview process. They can work in a room with a screened adult or a paid staff person. A paid child care worker is a youth or adult who is paid directly by the church to care for children at a church event. Adults in this category will be screened. Youth will be required to go through the same application and interview process. The one difference with youth is we do not do background checks on teenagers. We will ask them to fill out the same application, but in the background check part, that's going to be left off. Any questions there on where you fit? Yay, we all know who we are. 1.3, we're going to define some abuses. Physical abuse is a violent, non-accidental contact resulting in injury. This includes, but not limited to, striking, biting, shaking. Injuries include bruises, fractures, cuts, and burns. Note, physical abuse does not always have to leave identifiable physical evidence. For example, there can be internal bleeding or internal bruising. Sexual abuse is any form of sexual activity with a child or youth, whether at church, at home, or in any other setting. The abuser may be an adult or another child. Sexual abuse includes inappropriate touching with or without clothing, and demands for sexual performance, sexual threats, or coercion for sexual purposes. And emotional abuse is a pattern of intentional conduct which crushes the youth's spirit, attacks him or her self-worth through rejection, threats, terrorization, isolations, or belittling. Does all that kind of make sense? Any questions about what abuse is? Cool. Now, we're going to get into the two-person rule next. The two-person rule, we're going to talk about it here. This is probably an area where we'll have some conversations, but let's save those to the second section where we'll actually deal with a little more detail. This two-person rule is defined as having at least 2 volunteers or paid staff in any classroom or setting, at least one of which must be a screened adult or a paid staff person. And you can go back and see those definitions there. In working with children's ages birth through grade 5, the two-person rule dictates that at least one screened adult or paid staff person plus a youth volunteer or adult volunteer must be present. In youth ministry, grade 6 through 12, the two-person rule states that at least one screened adult or paid staff person, and another adult volunteer who's at least 18 years old must be present. You can't have your two-person rule include teenagers if they're teaching teenagers. Now we're going to get into screening. Adults who regularly, more than once a month, work with children and youth through Canopy Roads Baptist Church-sponsored activities, and each paid staff person will be screened. Those who work regularly with children, youth will be oriented on this policy prior to beginning their regular involvement. Each person being considered to work regularly with children and or youth, whether as a volunteer or paid staff person, shall fill out the application form. That's what you have in your hands. The screening is good for 5 years, after which time rescreening will be necessary. The screening includes a background check as well. All paid staff members will be required to have a level 2 background check. Each adult applying to work with children, youth shall authorize the church to conduct a criminal background check, and the church pays. Yay! The church must obtain a written authorization form to run a background check. That's also what you have there as well. 2.5. Before beginning work with children or youth, each paid staff member and volunteer will sign a statement they have read and understood and agreed and abide by the child protection policy. And you have that as well. After the application and background screening have been completed, the decision will be made to adopt, accept, or reject the applicant as a paid staff member or as a volunteer to work with youth or children. Where it has been determined that an applicant should not work with children and youth, those persons involved with the decision should handle it in a sensitive manner. A senior pastor or designated member should inform the applicant in person. The specific reasons for the decision should be given whenever possible. A written notation will be placed when the completed application, and these documents will be kept on file in the church office for a minimum of 5 years. It is important that all records be kept locked in a cabinet at the church office, and that's on a need-to-know basis. If the applicant has been convicted of a crime or has an arrest record, the senior pastor and respective program director shall make a determination regarding the individual's request to work with children. Although not required to personally accomplish the above tasks, the senior pastor or designated member shall be responsible for ensuring the compliance with 2.1 through 2.9. Program directors are responsible for enforcing this policy. Okay, so basically what we talked about there was background checks and screening and all that. This is a very sensitive sensitive issue, and I know that we all have stuff in our past. I don't want you to think because you have something in your past, when we do these background checks, we're going to go, you're out, or anything like that. If there's something that's too bad, we may bring you in and talk to you about it, but we do that to ensure the safety of our kids, and just to cover our bases, because we don't want to be in a lurch. Any questions in dealing with screening or anything of that nature? This is one if you all have any questions on, we can. This is a big one. And Todd, if you see I missed something, Todd was one of our chief architects. Please raise your hand and say, you missed it. Cool. Okay, number 3. Ongoing education is a person who work with children. The church shall conduct regular, at least annual training focused on the current issues in child protection policy for those working with children and youth. And you can see there some of the things that may include. That is what this is. This is your regular training, yearly training thing. This one is not near as fun as the ones we hope to have in the future, but this is the first one. The other ones we want to deal with things like how to identify an abused child, or how do I encourage parents to parent. We'll bring an expert in, and we'll have some really constructive training times at that time. This one is not near as fun, and so but the ones in the future hopefully will be. Supervision of youth and children and youth. All activities involving children and youth will be supervised by at least one screened adult. When feasible, each room set aside for children and youth shall have a door or window. You'll notice that as we go through most of this policy, we are actually doing most of this, which is great. There's only one room on this campus that has children and youth in it that does not have a window. And that's back in the children's building on the back left-hand side. And so that door should be left open if there's children in it. So that's the only thing there. 4.21, that sounds 4.21. Birth to 5th grade, this is supervision. The 2-person rule is the expectation as defined under general rules. When feasible, there should be at least 2 screened adults present, and whether 2 adults are family members, it is preferred that a 3rd person, grade 6 or above, be present in addition to a designated person, program leader, director. Should periodically check on the classroom. Children should be escorted to and from the bathroom facilities, or otherwise leaving the room by either one of the screened, by the supervising adults, or by a designated screen adult who checks on all classrooms. Where the 2-person rule is not possible. Now get that, the top part is what we want to have happen as much as possible. But we also know that things happen. And when it is not possible, the door will remain open and the screen adult will periodically check on each classroom. Each leader will be required to wear a name tag while serving the classroom for identification purposes. Whenever you turn in your little booklet, your 4-page guy, we'll take that, and after the background check's been processed, you'll get a special name tag that will say that you're cleared or screened or something of that nature. And all adults who work with children and youth or preschool will have that special name tag. That way we can identify those who have been screened and those who have not been screened, background screened. Grades 6 through 12. The 2-person rule is the expectation as defined above. Where the 2-person rule is not possible, classroom doors will remain open and a designated screen person will periodically check on the classrooms. And the same thing with name tags. Is there any questions about the 2-person rule? Now, there's some ramifications of this that could be really big. How does that work with preschool or child care within the church? That's something we're still working on. How's that work with band practice? They're having band practice up here, and there's one teenager watching the classroom. Well, that may not be permissible anymore under the rules. And so we have a lot of ramifications to the 2-person rule. And so for you ministry leaders, it's going to be difficult because we're going to have more volunteers. And so with the youth side of things, we're pretty much good for the most part. And when we're not, we have the door open. And so on Sunday mornings, we meet in here. And this is kind of a big room. And so it's covered in here. Open door policy. Parents, volunteers, or staff of the church will be permitted to visit and observe all programs at any time. Check in and check out. Parents or other adults responsible for children who are birthed through grade 5 must check in at their classroom or event location. They will be given a security badge with the identification of the church. Matching the identification of the parent will be required to release the child to the parent or responsible adult. This last line is huge, and it's very difficult for those of us who have kids and volunteer. Picking up children by a non-authorized person is forbidden. So that means you can't send your teenage son or your 5th grader to go pick up the preschool kid. That's not permissible. And so That may mean you have to break away from a conversation to go. That may mean you need to make special arrangements with that ministry leader to make sure that you're compliant there in that area. 4.5, supervision of non-classroom activities. At least 2 screen adults should be present for all non-classroom activities involving children or youth. Any meetings held in an individual's home should be supervised by at least 2 adults, at least one of whom is not a member of the same family. Meetings held in an individual's home must be pre-approved by the children and youth parents and the church. Counseling of youth, instances of youth or children instances of youth or children counseling where circumstances dictate that counseling would be most effective on a one-on-one basis. An appropriate church paid staff person may meet individually with a child or youth with the knowledge of at least one other paid staff person or a screened adult. At any counseling session with children or youth, the door of the room used should remain open the entire session unless there's a glass door or a wall allowing clear view into the room. 4.7. Following children and youth events, it is inevitable that occasionally a child transportation will arrive after all other participants have departed. That happens every Wednesday night. In those circumstances, a child youth may unavoidably be supervised by one screened adult. Under these circumstances, it is still preferred to have 2 persons, one screen, stay with the children and youth. However, the general rule requiring the presence of 2 screened adults may be suspended, and one screened adult may exercise his or her best judgment for the participants' well-being. Let's say that happens on a Wednesday night. What we'll do here is we'll actually hang out outside. We won't be inside the building. And so be thinking, is there somebody else holding me accountable every time you do something with child or youth? Child care for adults, small groups, or home teams. The church does not provide child care for adult small groups or home teams. Individual groups may make arrangements for child care for children or group members. The church financial condition allows may reimburse all or a portion of said child care expenses upon the written request. Let me explain that real fast. If you're a home team leader, what that means is you take care of the child care. We just reimburse you. What that does is it puts a layer of protection between us and that child care worker, because that child care worker is not screened by the church. We don't know who they are. They haven't filled the application. And so by you getting your own child care, if you're in a home team, and if something happens, that protects the church as a whole. It doesn't necessarily protect you anymore, but you also know that child care worker better than we could. And so it puts a level of protection there. Is there any questions about the 2-person rule, open door policies, counseling times, anything of that nature? I can tell you guys are super thrilled. I appreciate your enthusiasm as we continue on into section 5. I'm sorry, yes, ma'am.
On the 2-person rule, a lot of times we, on Sunday, will meet in that last room window there, and I'm usually one or the other because we split the building.
Yeah.
We are by ourselves.
Absolutely.
So is that room okay?
It's absolutely okay. It's got a glass door, and I'm constantly walking back and forth right there.
I just didn't know we needed to leave the door.
It's not a bad idea to leave it cracked, at least. You don't have to leave it all the way open, but there's a logic there. We do have the senior class right next door, and I want to make sure that environment's not, disturbed. And that's fine. And here's fine.
Generally, it's usually one person, and sometimes one person can.
Yeah, and in this building, I walk in and out of here quite a bit too. And so, and there's not really a door you can leave open here because this building's an open.
Well, there's enough traffic.
Oh, I know. Good question. Anybody else have a question? All right. This next section on transportation has a lot to do with teenagers, but maybe not as much to do with children. Maybe on occasion, but definitely not with preschool as much. But let's start. Transportation of youth and children is an important concern. Their safety can be at risk in a variety of ways. Therefore, certain discretion must be used depending on the event attended, the locale of the event, and the age group of participating. This policy includes requirements and guidelines. When feasible, there should be an adherence to the recommendations in the guidelines. It is expected that the requirements will always be followed. Drivers must be known to the designated adult and must be known as an adult leader of the event. We're going to skip some of these because they deal with if we owned a bus or transportation, but the church does not own a vehicle. So go down to 5.14. Drivers must require that the manufacturer installed seatbelts be used at all time, and the number of passengers must not exceed the number of seatbelts. Drivers should be advised of the designated route and should not deviate from it except in cases of emergency or road detours. Skip on down to 8. Staff members and event leaders should have cell phones and should make them available for the use in event of vehicle breakdown or an emergency. Does that all make sense? Cool. Pretty much common sense stuff. Drivers of buses, 14 passengers or more, should be accompanied by at least one other screened adult. So that means if we're in a bus, there should be 2 screened adults in that bus. We don't drive buses often, but on occasions we do. And so there should be 2 screened adults in there. Under some circumstances, youth will be allowed to provide their own transportation. Adult youth leaders may advise and assist, but shall not require any child or youth to ride with another youth driver to a church-endorsed event. What that means, let's say Jordan Stover has his van. I cannot tell teenagers to go ride with Jordan Stover. And if there's another option, they will not ride with Jordan Stover. Not because Jordan Stover's a bad driver. He's never been in a wreck. But, yeah. But I as an adult leader, cannot tell a teenager or a child to go ride with Jordan, whether it's to go home, whether it's to go to Chick-fil-A and get the Chick-fil-A Wednesday sandwich, or down to Fun Station for something like that. I cannot endorse that. Sometimes it happens, but on a church-endorsed event, that will never happen. So I hope that kind of makes sense there. Yes. Yeah. You gave authorization for her to hop in the car with Jordan, and that is your call. There we go. We're covered. And so that's kind of it. There's going to be circumstances like that all the time, and we know that. And we have some really good drivers. We also have some that I wouldn't advise ever hopping in a car. And so I can't tell you that, but just use wisdom in that respect. All right, requirements for trip and retreat supervision. Trip and retreat settings can call for different protection requirements depending on the circumstances. What follows are the requirements and guidelines of this policy. The requirements will always be implemented depending on the circumstances of the setting, who is in attendance, and etc. Some or all the guidelines should be implemented. Those in charge of the trip or retreat should be mindful of both requirements and guidelines. Here we go. There will be at least 2 screened adults present for all trips, retreats, or other events where the children or youth gather at or away from or at the church campus. There will be at least 1 screened adult for each gender present at a co-ed overnight events. A single gender overnight event, at least 2 adults present shall be at this, of the same gender as the participants. The person in charge for each overnight trip and or retreat shall carry parental permission slips, including permission for emergency or medical care. We actually do a really good job at this. And so, yes. 6.2, in a hotel set type setting, rooms should be assigned as followed. Separate rooms for adults and children or youth should be assigned at least 2 children or youth per room. What that means, this is thick, and this is difficult, but this is what the policy is, and this is not uncommon. If we have 4 children and 2 adults, we don't put 1 adult with 2 kids, 1 adult with 2 kids. That's not what we want to have happen. We need to have 4 kids in one room and 2 adults in another room. The reason being, all it takes is one accusation without another adult in the room, and you're in trouble. And so you have to, if you're going to do that, you got to have both adults in that room at the same time. They can never be separate. They can never be in there by themselves. It's difficult. The ideal thing is to have those rooms that have the adjoining doors and things like that. I actually try to get suites most of the time, where there's 2 bedrooms or 3 or 4 bedrooms, so that way they're all in one big box, and that way we're covered. 6.22, assignment should be made so an adult room is between 2 children or youth rooms. Random hall monitoring and room checks should be performed at night by 2 adults of the same gender. A hotel should be selected where the rooms rooms open to the interior and not to the outside. Instances may arise where fewer rooms for adults are available. In this circumstance, an adult will be placed in the room with a child in a separate bed. That is the only way that you can pull it off. The children, even if they got to sleep on the floor, the adult gets to the bed. But that's just the way it is. At least that's our excuse. We have it written down in the policy now. Section 7 is very serious. And this is something I want you guys not just to have a knowledge of here, but to actually ask questions about if you have any concerns. Because this is huge. This is how we respond to an allegation of abuse. Everyone in the church has a moral responsibility and a legal duty to report suspected abuse whenever it comes to their attention. Regardless of where that abuse takes place, reporting abuse is the form of ministering to the needs of those crying out for help. Therefore, the proper authorities must be notified as soon as possible. And it's got the local law enforcement in the hotline there. 7.1, immediately yet with dignity and respect for the sacred worth of the accused shall be removed from further involvement with children or youth. Once proper authorities have been contacted and the safety of the children and youth is secured, the pastor or other designated person should inform the accused that an abuse has been reported. If the abuse is observed by, disclosed to, or suspected by a volunteer and or a paid staff member of the church, the observer shall report the incident immediately to the pastor or designated person. And if the accused is a pastor or a member of his or her family, the allegation shall be reported to a member of the administrative ministries team as soon as possible. The parents of the victim shall be notified as soon as possible. Whatever steps are necessary to ensure the safety and well-being of the child and youth until the parents arrive shall be taken. Note, if one or both parents of the alleged abuser follow the advice of the authorities concerning the notification of others. The care and safety of the victim is the first priority. All allegations will be taken seriously. The church shall respond in a positive and supportive manner to the victim and the victim's family. The church should provide a supportive atmosphere to all those who are affected, offering both objectivity and empathy as it seeks to create a climate in which healing can take place. After having reported the suspected abuse to the proper authorities, the appointed pastor or designated leader will report the incident immediately to the administrative ministries team. A written report will be prepared by the AMT of the steps taken by the church in response to the reported abuse. All reports related to the incident shall be kept in the incident file in a secure place. Any contact with the media shall be handled by a senior pastor or his or her designated appointee. The church spokesperson should generally convey a spirit of concern for the spiritual and physical and emotional well-being of all those affected, and that the matter be diligently and appropriately handled. What this means, if you are accused, it's bad. As a youth pastor who works with 60, 80 teenagers, this is scary because all it takes is one allegation and I'm guilty. It's not innocent until proven guilty when it comes to allegations with kids. And so with that in mind, as a volunteer leader, make sure you're not putting yourself in a situation to where you can be perceived as doing something inappropriate, because per this policy, you are guilty until you're proven innocent. We have to take you out of that situation and contact the authorities immediately. This is not harsh compared to what other people do. This is actually the standard for most child protection policies. But keep that in mind. We want to raise that bar really high of accountability, because we're called to make a difference in this world, and sometimes an accidental, unrealized situation can come up and put you in a really bad spot. And so as a leader, we have moral requirements and legal requirements to make sure that if we see or suspect abuse, that we handle it in a very quick manner and that we report it to the proper authorities. And so, with that in mind, just be as diligent as possible. Number one, to protect yourself as a leader that works with kids. And number two is one who's watching kids and has the moral and ethical and spiritual and legal responsibility to make sure they're being taken care of. That is the heart of this policy, is the protection of children. And so as you read through that, make sure you keep that in mind. Any questions in regard to how we handle reporting of allegations of child abuse? Yes, ma'am. Who does the reporting of the... If you suspect abuse, you go to your ministry leader immediately. If you believe it's the ministry leader, you go to the pastor. If you believe it's the pastor, you go to the administrative ministries team. If you think it's a parent, you can go straight to the authorities. But then go to the ministry leader so we know what's going on. That's your discretion. You have that responsibility to do what you think is appropriate. And so, yeah, it's not fun. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. It changes. And so if you don't know who it is, you can contact me or Matt. If it's one of us, hopefully it's not one of us, in your program every week, not every week, almost every week has a list of people who are there. If you go to our website, I believe I put it on our website, but if not, I will absolutely do that. Same as elders, yeah. Yeah, it's the same as the elders. I will make sure it's on the website because I think it is, but that's a good question. And you'd be able to access that through the members link on the bottom. You can see who the elders are. I think I put that on there, but I may not have. Any other questions? It's good questions. Great. Incident report and and reporting. In the event of an incident or an accident and an incident form will be filled out and submitted to a ministry team leader. You will have copies of these accident forms in the next 60 days. At each ministry leader will have them. They'll be at the preschool table and at the youth table and at the children's tables, and you can grab those. This is if somebody breaks an arm, scratches themselves, gets stung by a bee, jumps off the roof, whatever it is. Make sure you fill this out. Implementation. Unless otherwise specifically stated, it shall be the responsibility of the AMT to implement this policy, to design and conduct future training and ensure the ongoing effectiveness of the policy. All those who participate in the life of this congregation and use its facilities, individuals, organizations, and groups within or outside this congregation are expected to respect, implement, and adhere to these provisions at a minimum. And then this talks about the adoption of it. So that is this. I know this seemed like a lot, but any other questions before we continue? And just so you know, we did it in 27 minutes. Yes. All right. You should have gotten a piece of paper there that includes your background screening. I forgot to grab one, but you can see it there. It's pretty basic. If you don't mind, go ahead and fill those out. And what's going to happen is over the next 60 days, they're going to do a background check on you to make sure that you have any that were covered. And there is a orange envelope as you walk out that says background checks, and you can just simply stick one in there. Oh, thank you. And you can just drop it in there, and those will be filed securely. The process of processing the background checks is such that there will be only one or two eyes that even see the authorization of the background check. And so if you do have things that pop up, the whole world will not know about it. And so y'all can go ahead and fill those out. Guys, thank you. I'm sorry, yes, ma'am.
Quick question.
Yeah.
The Social Security number, do you need the full number or can you use the last?
I had to have the full number. Yep, it's part of it.
I don't give away my social.
I know, I totally understand. I totally understand. But they are in a locked cabinet in the middle of nowhere, so no one knows where it's at, actually.
You
It's in the office.
State requires that. You can't get the background check without the Social Security.
Got to have the whole thing. We're actually able to do it without the driver's license, which is good. So, cool. Any other questions? What's that? Oh, well, it's all relative. And honestly, you'll see that in here it talks about references, I believe. It should. You don't have to put a reference because I'm your reference. And so you don't have to worry about that. We'll actually be checking references. So, no, you can skip the reference part. I'm sorry. Yeah, you can skip the references because I'm your reference. You were grandfathered in. Congratulations. Or grandmothered in or whatever. Guys, thank you so much for your time. If you want to move back to the tables back in the back to make it easier, feel free to do so. And I hope that you have a great Easter week this week.